His name's Alex Pereira, and he's truly one of the most terrifying human beings alive.
Bad motherfucker.
Oh.
With those kind words from Joe Rogan from the JRE podcast, let's give credit where it is definitely due. We have one of the biggest UFC debuts in forever, maybe? Alex Pereira making his debut, the first ever simultaneous two-division glory champion at middleweight, then the interim light heavyweight champ, then he won the full-time belt. Forget about the rematch that he had where he lost it. That wasn't that long ago, but it was by decision. That's all right. He's going to be making his debut, taking on Greece's own Andreas Michailidis, a teammate of Colby Covington that's also on this card out of MMA Masters. And if we're talking about pure camp styles, for Michailidis, you get Covington, you get Miguel Baeza, Danny Chavez trains there too. A lot of notable UFC fighters out of a not so big gym down in the Miami area. But for Alex Pereira, he trains at Teixeira MMA and Fitness, and until last weekend, you might have gone, oh, okay, well, that's pretty good. I mean, who's there? Ciel Machado, like there's some guys. Oh yeah, that light heavyweight champion of the world trains there alongside him in Glover Teixeira. So credit where credit's due for Teixeira. I don't know how many people saw that coming, but there's not that many of you out there. Now, Matt, Alex Pereira is coming into this fight with a giant head of steam. And if you look at just his overall MMA record, it's 3-1. He lost his first ever fight. He took a long time off between MMA fights. But since then, he's looked good. His last MMA fight was in 2020, November of that year. Giant knockout win, very quick in that. But here's the thing. The overall record in kickboxing, 33-7, 21 wins by knockout. Matt, this guy's hands are lightning fast, and we talked about it before the video even started. His power's off the charts.
When he lands any technique, it sounds like thunder. It really does. Like body kicks, even hooks that seem to like hit his opponent's gloves. It sounds like two metal bats hitting each other. That's the type of power that this guy brings into the cage. And he had massive knockout power with boxing gloves on in a kickboxing setting. So you'd have to imagine, with only 4-ounce gloves, just how powerful of a striker that this guy must be. And you don't even just have to worry about the hands with him. It is the kick combinations. He does have beautiful combinations with his hands too. But like you said, this might be one of the more hyped up debuts in recent memory. Like, I remember when Gokhan Saki fought, who was it? It was the Brazilian...
Luis Enrique?
Thank you. Luis Enrique, who didn't have the best run in the UFC, who oddly did well to start out that fight, but we all remember the crazy highlight reel knockout that Saki had. Now, did Gokhan Saki have the most successful MMA career? No, not really, because he really was just like a kickboxer who decided to put on MMA gloves. And I do think Pereira will have a more successful MMA tenure. But this is what I will say about Alex Pereira and just his striking as a whole. I think he's a better kickboxer than Israel Adesanya. I think he's a better pure kickboxer than most guys in the UFC. I do think he's going to have a hard time, or at least a few growing pains early on in his UFC tenure, because what we saw out of Adesanya was a guy who had multiple MMA fights in the regional scene. He had fought guys like Melvin Gillard, who, yes, isn't really a middleweight, but still an experienced guy who had been around and just been around the scene for a while. If you beat guys like that, you're at least learning and sort of upgrading your own MMA IQ as you progress, and that's what I really liked at Adesanya. He waited, and then he eased himself into the UFC. The thing I do worry about with Pereira is that, yes, his striking isn't even a 10 out of 10. It is a 90 out of 10. It's at another level that really nobody else in the UFC is going to reach because he spent so much of his life just purely striking. What I do worry about are the intangibles. I don't think he's going to have that knockout takedown defense or the lights out takedown defense that Adesanya showed early on. I don't think he has the footwork of a guy like Adesanya because Pereira is more of a plodding forward striker. He is somebody who really marches forward, likes to throw his combinations, start things with leg kicks. And I do think that that's going to... Listen, if he fought Andrew Sanchez, I know he's no longer in the UFC, like, that's a matchup I would really worry about for Pereira. Now, do I think he's going to have a hard time with Andreas Michailidis? I really don't. This is somebody who neither one of us was all that high on coming into the UFC. And yes, he has a good win over KB Bullard, but again, that was another guy who I know we were both fairly critical on the UFC, so for me... This just feels like one of those, hey, this guy beat Israel Adesanya, we're going to use that to market it in the future... I think we all know what I'm getting towards. It just feels like this is a stepping stone matchup for Pereira in his UFC debut.
For Poatan, you look at it, he didn't just beat Israel Adesanya, he knocked him out. And he didn't just knock him out, he also beat him in 2016 by decision, too. He's got 2 wins over Israel Adesanya in pure kickboxing.
Wait, you must be a Joe Rogan fan.
He's taken on some big names. Simon Marcus Big win there.
Canadian.
Bazooka Joe Valtellini, Glory Hall of Famer, has announced some of his fights. But yeah, I mean, when I go through this, for Andreas Michailidis, I was a little bit critical of him coming into the UFC. I know he had that fight against Modestas Bukauskas where he's having a little bit of success until those weird elbows, and then he kind of falls out of the cage. They call it a knockout loss. He has beaten UFC level competition coming into the UFC. He beat Marcel Fortuna by knockout. Wild finish in that one. Andreas Michailidis, European BJJ champ, 3-time kickboxing champion. Like, he has those things. It's just bringing them all together in an MMA cage. And for Michailidis, it was his last fight against KB Bhullar. And even the striking numbers, I went back, they might look close. Go back and watch the fight. Michailidis wins that fight every single minute of that fight. He's winning it on the feet. It's like it's too simple. Like, KB's standing there with his hands like this, and Michailidis all day is hitting him right up the middle. So for Andreas, I just worry a little bit. His takedown defense isn't all that great. Is he going to have to worry about that in this fight? No, he's not. But his attempts to get takedowns aren't all that great either. It's the wrestling that really struggles to get into the grappling. So once he gets taken down, sometimes he can get back up to his feet. Sometimes he struggles. You look at the losses, they're all knockout losses. So I don't necessarily like that. But again, I look at the odds for this one. Pereira open a -150 favorite. He's -257 or thereabouts on best fight odds. For Michailidis, open a +130. He's a +203 right now. He has those abilities on the ground, and that's how this fight's going to be marketed. That's how I look at it. Michailidis can get a submission in this fight. I don't doubt it. I mean, Alex Pereira is going to have to do his damnedest to keep it on the feet. But every fight starts on the feet, Craig. So that's exactly where Pereira has that advantage. And again, he does stand very high with his hands up, MMA or in kickboxing, and his legs are totally exposed. So if you're a great wrestler, I mean, boom goes the dynamite. Now, I'm sure he's trained with the best in the world at Teixeira MMA and Fitness to negate some of those kind of attributes that fighters would have against him. I look at this one, though, again, I would be worried about putting a lot of money on a fighter that's 3-1 in MMA against a guy who's fought in MMA for a very long time. So yes, I understand Pereira, knockout win, unanimous decision win over Adesanya from years past. But again, when it comes to this fight, I haven't been that high on Andreas Michailidis in the UFC, which leads me to pick Pereira because, again, he has that touch of death type of power. But again, I would stay away from this. You work hard for your money. This wouldn't be the one I'd put it on.
I love the fact that he trains with Glover Teixeira, and I'm really happy that you brought that point up multiple times because I think that's going to be a massive key just to his overall progression throughout the UFC. Because if he can consistently stay training with Glover, who, yes, is a little bit older, but you have to think, MMA knowledge-wise, like, Glover Teixeira has forgot more than any of us will probably ever know. And the thing about that matchup, too, is Glover's going to be able to work with you on all the things you don't do well because he is so well-rounded himself. He is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He does have phenomenal MMA wrestling. Those are all things that he's going to be able to work with Pereira with. And they're the same size. That really does matter. If there was a massive size discrepancy between the two, then they wouldn't be able to have a lot of that one-on-one training. But the fact that they are those primary training partners is a very big deal.
Something that also scares me about this fight, for Alex Pereira, he's had 2 kickboxing fights this year in 2021. He won the first one by split decision. They rematched. He lost by split decision. And that wasn't all that long ago. The point I want to make, those fights were at light heavyweight in kickboxing, and I wrote it down here somewhere in my notes that that's at 209 pounds, if I'm not mistaken. And in the first fight, Todd Grisham, get out of there, Travis, and Bazooka Joe say, hey, why doesn't Pereira move up to heavyweight? Because he has the frame. I mean, look at it.
Huge.
He's 6'4". He's got a giant reach advantage over a lot of people. I do also worry a little bit about the weight in this fight, seeing how he has such a giant frame, and Michailidis is kind of almost purpose-built for 185 too. So yeah, I'm worried about that.
No, I agree, and it is kind of surprising. If Pereira did fight at 205, guys up there are a lot less well-rounded in the majority. Like the 205-pound division, let's just be honest, there's a lot of primary strikers, primary grapplers, not a lot of super well-rounded guys as opposed to middleweight, where you've got guys like Marvin Vettori, Robert Whittaker, Kelvin Gastelum, like guys who can mix everything and do everything. So for Pereira, a path to the title might be easier at 205 pounds, actually, when you really think about it. But I do think the UFC wants him at middleweight just so they can try to build up that storyline of him versus Adesanya. I think that's a great point, though, bring up the weight. Maybe that could be a talking point by question mark kicks. But here today, I do like not Michelle Pereira, goodness, I do like Alex Pereira in this fight.
Both of us going with Brazil's Alex Pereira with the Glover Teixeira connection to get the win. You let us know who you have down below in that comment section. I want to hear from you. Do we do a good job? Do you have Michailidis? Do you have Pereira? Did you have Glover Teixeira last weekend? This should be an absolute barn burner of a fight. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it.